All right, let's dive into one of the biggest, most landscape-shattering deals in modern media history. On December 5th, 2025, the news dropped, and honestly, Hollywood hasn't been the same since. But to really get how we got here, we first need to look at the two giants at the very center of this story. So to understand this whole thing, you have to understand the two titans at its core. On one side, you got Netflix, right? The undisputed king of streaming, with over 300 million subscribers. But they had a huge problem, an IP cliff. They were amazing at creating hits, sure, but they didn't own those timeless, multi-generational franchises. Then, on the other side, you have Warner Brothers Discovery. They literally owned a fortress of intellectual property. We're talking Batman, Harry Potter, HBO, the whole shebang. Their problem? They were drowning in almost $40 billion of debt. So what happens when the company that desperately needs permanent content meets the company that has it but desperately needs cash? Well, you get a single seismic solution. A deal that didn't just make waves, it basically created a brand new ocean for the entire entertainment industry. And that is the price tag, $82.7 billion. Just let that number sink in for a moment. This wasn't just a simple purchase. This was a monumental bet on the entire future of media, and it was funded by a mountain of new debt. You see, for Netflix, this was about way more than just buying a studio. This was the price to build a content fortress, a huge move to secure their dominance not for the next quarter, but for the next century. They weren't just buying movies, they were buying permanence. Now, that headline number is massive, but the structure of the deal is where the real strategy is. Forget the $82.7 billion for a sec, and look at the other figures. They're projecting $2 to $3 billion in savings every single year. The new combined company, it would control almost half of the entire premium streaming market. And for the Warner Bros. Shareholders, they get a mix of cash and Netflix stock, which ties their fortunes directly to the success of this new media juggernaut. So, how does a company even begin to justify a price tag this big? What was the strategic thinking inside Netflix that made this colossal gamble actually make sense? Well, as we're about to see, their entire justification rests on a really brilliant three-pillar strategy. So here's the playbook in a nutshell. First, something they called surgical extraction. Second, building what they dubbed the forever library. And third, a move that shocked everyone, the theatrical pivot. Each one of these pillars was designed to solve a critical problem for Netflix and lock in their dominance for the long haul. Let's start with pillar number 1, surgical extraction. Now, this might just be the most clever part of the entire deal. Netflix didn't want to buy all of Warner Bros. Discovery. Nope. They only wanted the absolute best parts, the movie studio and HBO. They structured the deal to leave all the declining legacy cable networks behind. So why was this so important? Well, Netflix is a high-growth tech company, which means it has a really high valuation from investors. Buying a bunch of slow-growth cable channels would have totally contaminated that valuation and scared Wall Street away. This move was pure financial genius. They get all the iconic IP without any of the old-school baggage, which just gets spun off into a whole separate company. This brings us to the second pillar, which builds right on top of that idea of getting only the best assets. It's all about building the forever library moat. This is really the heart of the deal. It's a massive defensive play to achieve what you might call content sovereignty. The goal was simple, but so audacious. Stop renting culture's biggest hits and finally own them outright. This was Netflix's move to officially end the streaming wars. And this slide just perfectly illustrates the power of that moat. By locking down franchises like Harry Potter and the DC Universe, they not only get that content forever, but they also eliminate their biggest streaming competitor, Max. And maybe even more critically, they block deep-pocketed rivals like Apple or Amazon from ever getting their hands on this library. And the result of all that? Unprecedented power to set prices in the streaming world. Finally, we get to pillar 3, and for so many people, this was the biggest surprise of all, the pivot to theatrical windows. I mean, for years, Netflix was the company that was supposedly trying to kill the movie theater. And with this one deal, they made a hard pivot, committing to give Warner Bros. Films a full traditional run in cinemas. So why the sudden change of heart? It really comes down to two key reasons. First, talent. The world's best directors, we're talking Christopher Nolan, Denis Villeneuve, they demand at the actual release. This pivot gives Netflix access to that absolute top-tier creative talent. Second, marketing. A huge box office hit like Barbie or Dune becomes a massive months-long advertisement that drives incredible buzz for when the film finally lands on streaming. The cinema is no longer the enemy, it's a marketing funnel.
So, after breaking down this entire three-pillar strategy, we are left with the final $82 billion question. Was it the right move?
You really can't overstate the scale here. The source material is spot on when it calls this the largest media deal of the decade. I mean, it makes even Disney's monumental purchase of Fox look small by comparison. The stakes could not possibly be higher. And at the end of the day, there are two ways to view this. The bull case says this was an absolute masterstroke, a decisive move that proves owning the best content is way more important than just making it, securing Netflix's reign for 100 years. The bear case, though, warns this is a classic empire-building trap, a potentially disastrous, debt-fueled acquisition that sounds a lot like the infamous AOL-Time Warner merger that destroyed billions in value. So now the question is, for you, based on this strategic breakdown, do you see this as a visionary move to build an unassailable content fortress, or a reckless gamble that history's going to judge as a monumental blunder? If you were a shareholder, how would you vote on this deal?